Greetings, everyone. I just wanted to touch base with all of you and let you know we are continuing to keep you in our prayers during these very unusual times, trusting and believing that the peace of God is abiding upon your homes, upon your families, and that in the midst of all of the uncertainty, there's still the assurance that God is absolutely in control, and that we have the promises of His Word, and there's no reason to fear. We may not understand, we may have a lot of questions, but we don't have to be afraid. And so I wanted to touch base with you. I also wanted to just kind of share a couple of things that the Lord has put on my mind today. One of those things was earlier this morning. I just began to think again about seasons. And I have said this many times in my preaching, but God established, and we find it in Genesis, that from the very beginning of time, God established seasons, and He established seasons in nature. And I believe that the primary purpose of that, or one of the primary purposes of that, was to demonstrate a spiritual principle. Because it's the same thing spiritually. It's the same thing with our lives. It's not just the climate of spring, summer, fall, and winter, but we all go through seasons, and we go through seasons sometimes as a church collectively. But I think at any given time we are probably all in a variety of seasons. And so I was thinking, even in the context of kind of where we are today, the last couple of weeks, what has brought us to this point. The unique thing about a season is, and with regards to natural seasons, we know there are certain dates on the calendar that mark the new season, but we also know that prior to the new season, while we are still in the old season, there are days that feel like the new season, because it's a transition. It's not an automatic instant change. And then even once we begin to move into a new season, there will still be days that feel like the old season. Today's kind of one of those days. Yesterday was a very comfortable temperature-wise day, very beautiful day, and here it is today, and it's a little more brisk. It's a little cooler outside, but we don't fear. We're not afraid that we're going backwards to winter. We just understand we're in a transition, and I want to encourage you, and as we again use the overall circumstances that we're in, and whatever lessons God is teaching us from that we want to take with us when all of this is over. And so I'm reminding you, and I want you to, as we live this is not, I'm pretty sure there's not going to be an instantaneous change. There's not going to be a hard stop to all of this. There's not going to be a sudden moment where life just resumes. We were having a district board meeting online yesterday, and someone made the point that even once this is sort of passed, I wonder how long it's going to take some people to sort of be comfortable going back to the crowds and the group settings, and I'm sure some will just simply quickly resume going back to the norm, but I would imagine there will be those that it's going to take them a little time to adjust. And so again, as we move through COVID-19, we are living a season, and we are going to be living the changing of that season. And so again, I want to remind you that even in your lives individually, and in fact, some of you in the midst of the chaos that we seem to be in right now, the uncertainty. I believe some of you are actually in the midst of a season change right now for the better. Maybe you've been in winter personally, not just what we've just come through naturally, but you've been in winter, and you're beginning to come out of that. You've gotten a taste or a glimpse, and I know sometimes in that spiritual season change, when we do have some of those days that feel like the previous season, the enemy is really quick to sweep in those moments with doubts and fears and cause us to try to question and second guess. But if we can hold on to the fact that times are changing, the season is changing. And one of the other things that's kind of been on my mind today related to kind of seasons is also the idea of the weather and climate. As I'm sure you all know, there is a difference between the climate and the weather. The climate it's the overall pattern. It's the long-term pattern of the weather. Whereas weather, as we reference it, is a at times a daily thing. Again, yesterday was blue skies and warm and very enjoyable to be outside. Today's weather, it's overcast. There's a chance of rain that's going to be this afternoon, and so the weather changes. But what we need to learn to have our confidence in is not the weather. It's not the weather that may fluctuate from one day to the next, but our confidence needs to be in the climate. And if we are living in I guess sort of figuratively speaking, if we are living where God has placed us, we can trust the climate that God has for where we are living. And the climate of the church is victory. The climate of the church is revival and harvest. The climate of the church is power and the miraculous. But let's be honest, there are some days where the church has some sort of bad weather. It rains, it's dry, it's hot, it's not comfortable, but we don't abandon ship in those times. It actually rains in the desert. It does rain in the desert. However, if you're a farmer and you just happen to be in the desert on a day that it rains, you don't suddenly decide that you're going to purchase land in the desert and start farming because there was one day of rain. Because the climate is dry, hot. The climate it's not conducive to growing crops and seeing a harvest. And I want to remind you, I know we're in some unusual weather patterns right now, but let's not forget the climate. And the climate of the church is victory. The climate of the church is it's going to be a glorious church. So we're going to make it through some bad weather days. And the same thing applies in your lives personally. The climate, if you are walking with God, if you are growing in your relationship with God, your climate is one of victory. Your climate is one of blessings. Your climate is one of peace. But again, that doesn't mean there aren't some weather patterns that come through from time to time that are contrary to the climate. I also let me just give you an example, I guess, of a testimony of the climate in the midst of the weather. I received an email from William Spriggs this morning and sharing some updates. And during last week, they've got 6 of our P7 students. Last week, no church services where we all came together, no in-school Bible studies. That all is not happening right now, and yet they had 6 students that have expressed their desire to be baptized. And then this is really awesome. Not only did they have 6 students who have expressed their desire to be baptized, William shared with me that there's a young man he's been working with for a little while about receiving the Holy Ghost. And of course we know, I think one of the easiest places to do that is it's in a church service. The Spirit of God is moving, there's faith, there's people there that can help you, give you guidance and instruction in that process. But he got a text at 3 a.m. a couple of nights ago from this young man who was up praying, and he said that the Lord took over his tongue and he began to speak gibberish in the middle of the night all by himself. So that's the climate. I know the weather right now is we can't get together. The weather right now is very unusual, if you will. But I want to remind you today, not only collectively as the church, but individually, don't lose sight of what the climate is. This weather is going to pass, but the climate is going to remain. And the climate, again, God is in control. God's promises are true. God's word is true. And we're coming through this. And as I've said, and I'm going to keep saying it, and I believe it with all of my heart, we're coming through this stronger. And I believe you are going to come through this stronger as an individual. That whether you can see it or feel it right now, your relationship with God, your walk with God is being strengthened and solidified in new ways. But then also as a body, as much as we are disconnected physically, I am so encouraged by the connection that we have maintained spiritually, and obviously technology has been a tool by which we have done that. But the feedback from many of you is as far as the worship that's taken place in your home during services, and the move of God and the altar calls, if you will, in homes has been absolutely awesome. And so we're coming through this not weaker. We're not coming through this crippled. We're not coming through this just surviving. But God is doing some awesome, amazing things. And again, it's my burden and desire that we as a congregation collectively, but also as individuals, that we don't miss anything that God is trying to do in our lives through this season. And there's going to be more seasons, and I don't want to be negative, but again, when COVID-19 is no longer the issue, some of you have already been in a challenging season, or some of you may be entering into a challenging season, but there's a climate that you can trust. And the other thing about a season, I remind you, the other thing about a season is it is temporary. No season lasts forever. Most of us have our favorite season, and as many of you know, mine is winter, even though it was a very disappointing winter because we didn't get all that white stuff that I love for us to get in the winter time. But that's my favorite season. And then there are seasons some of us really don't like. I know a bunch of you don't like winter. You hate the cold. And so you survive the winter. And then others don't like the heat of the summer. And so the bottom line is, if it's the season you don't like, the good news is it's going to change. But I hate to say it, if it's the season you do like, the bad news is it's going to change. But there's a divine purpose and plan, and we understand also from nature, winter from an aesthetics perspective is not when there's no snow, all the brown trees, the branches that have no leaves, is not really considered a beautiful time of the year. And yet we know that there's some really important things that are happening in the middle of winter. And so even if you're in a winter right now, and I don't mean because of COVID-19, if you're in a winter, don't lose hope that God is doing some things. There's some strength that's taking place in your root system. There's some things that are happening that are going to be able to get you through the next season that may be the season you're looking forward to. But you need the winter to get you into the spring and through the summer, and that cycle is what keeps us healthy and strong. So again, we myself, my wife, we're continuing to keep you in our thoughts and our prayers for sure. As I posted on Facebook on Sunday, I miss all of you deeply, and as thankful as I am we're able to do what we're doing by technology, it's just not the same as being able to be with you. But I am thankful that God is keeping us and leading us, and we are being strengthened throughout this process. Just as a quick note, ending here, again, the one thing you can count on is at the very, very least, something is going to be streamed Thursday night, Sunday morning, Sunday night. Where that happens, the exact setting, as has already been the case, may vary. but we will continue to do something. And then I very well may be doing a little more communication with you this way throughout the week, rather than just those set particular days. So God bless you, and until next time, hang in there. God's got it all under control.